Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
And this is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan, read the paper on Sunday, February 16th, 2020.
Exactly.
Still recovering from Valentine's Day, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still recovering from Valentine's Day and looking forward to President's Day. So we have a lot to talk about because we were very busy this week. We saw a lot of cultural events. We have one upcoming. We will, in fact, talk about Parasite down the line a little bit. You might look forward to that. And there's a special section coming up on presidents as authors, which we're doing for the purpose of President's Day. So you'll want to stay tuned here, but maybe we should start right away, dig right into our first cultural event, and that would be, Tamsen?
We went to hear Gregory Porter at McCarter Theater in Princeton, New Jersey.
Yes, last weekend.
Gregory Porter.
A jazz singer.
Great jazz singer.
With a fantastic voice.
Fantastic, low voice.
That's right. Very rich. And, we've been familiar with him for a while, and we have friends who had signed up to go, and that sort of spurred us, I think, to sign up to go and buy the tickets to McCarter. And it's funny. The timing is, we've done this once before. You might call this a Valentine's Day concert, or you might not, but it was February 11th or so. It was early in the week. And we had done this before with Diane Reeves, who gave a wonderful concert a few years ago. And that might have been explicitly billed as a Valentine's Day concert.
I don't remember.
At McCarter. And the interesting thing is there was, in the Diane Reeves concert, which was a great concert, she didn't sing anything that was really Valentine's oriented or romantic, even though she does some very traditional stuff, including a lot of Ella Fitzgerald stuff, which easily would have lent itself to that. And it was kind of funny, we thought, but it was a good concert.
No, it was a great concert, and we had a great time.
And we did.
But it was not full of love songs.
Right.
Standards. That
just surprised us.
Yeah.
Just surprised us.
Well, yeah.
So Gregory Porter at the beginning of this concert, and he clearly has a very strong following. There are a lot of people very eager to see him. It was a full house. As we learned, as we listened to the concert, some people really knew his material. They were singing along to some stuff. And as he started just talking at the beginning, just warming the crowd up, he said, well, I know there's going to be requests. And he heard something. He said, oh, I can hear it now, the Valentine's Day requests. I hear it. And he didn't sing anything remotely romantic during the entire time. He didn't sing any standards. He didn't sing anything recognizable to someone who wasn't an ardent fan. And frankly, the songs he sang weren't so great. Although for his ardent fans, some of them clearly enjoyed them. But that kind of, in my mind, sort of took away from the concert. And I got less out of it than I thought I was going to. But what was your reaction?
Well, it was just weird. I mean, he really has an extraordinary voice.
Right.
And it's a low voice. And it's a voice you might remind you of Barry White. Yeah. In some ways.
I would call it a cross between Barry White and Nat King Cole.
Which is a funny cross. But anyway.
A smooth Barry White.
He's very smooth.
Yes.
He's super smooth.
Right.
And there was some anticipation for that kind of music.
And I should say his last album was Gregory Porter Sings Nat King Cole.
So it was kind of a shock.
Yeah, well, it was just...
the music that he did sing.
Yeah, it was not to say it was awful, but it was drawn from a different part of his repertoire, let's say. Some of it was gospel-oriented, or at least he was singing about his experience as a young boy in church. Some of it was politically oriented.
His mother was a preacher.
Right. But none of it was what you would call memorable. None of it was, the songs really weren't that good. I mean, I guess they had a point. And maybe if I was more familiar with the material, I would have gotten more out of them. But it seemed to be interesting. And it's very hard to tell what other people are getting out of the concert. But projecting perhaps a little bit. But I know you got the feeling that a lot of people might have been disappointed.
But I don't know. Maybe I was reading something into it. Yeah. But the music was fairly political.
Yeah. Which is fine in of itself if it's tuneful and otherwise memorable and great, but it wasn't.
I understand that he is going to sing, what he wants to sing.
Absolutely entitled to do that.
Okay. And I understand that it is perhaps more fulfilling to sing things that are meaningful to you personally.
Right.
than to sing what might be, standards that you've sung a million times to try to make a buck.
Right.
And you're tired of, and you feel you no longer have to be chained to that.
Right.
Nonetheless, for whatever reason, that's the kind of thing I was sort of expecting and hoping for. And I think that would resonate with me at the moment.
Would have made the concert a better concert for you. And I don't think...
The thing is, here's the problem.
Yeah.
The tickets were not inexpensive.
Right.
For Princeton.
Right.
They're like $65 to $90.
Yeah.
And I feel McCarter should be more clear about the playlist.
Yeah.
Before you pay
or
that
the
kind
style.
of money.
I mean, especially since he has such a varied repertoire. There's such a range. I mean, it's not like it's opera versus pop, but he has very different stuff. And if we had been a little more clued in, we probably wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, we are clueless.
Yeah, we're clueless.
But he is a wonderful singer.
He is a great singer, and but if he gives another concert like this, I'm not going.
But
honestly.
It didn't really ring the Valentine's Day chimes.
No. But it was funny. Again, totally entitled to sing what he wants. But it is funny that he acknowledged with a huge smile at the beginning of the Valentine's Day thing, and purposely nothing like that, which was kind of odd.
I have to say, the band was kind of super.
Did you think so?
Oh yeah, and I thought.
I think you always think the band is super, honestly.
No, we've been to some very good ones lately.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And we've been to.
You loved Harry Connick.
The singers that we've been hearing happen also to be, I think, great musicians.
That's right.
Okay, and Gregory Porter, Diane Reeves, no exceptions.
Well,
their instrument is their voice.
True,
but they have great
Harry,
instincts in those areas and great skill in those areas, and I think they gather people around them who are great performers. I really thought the sax guy was great.
Yeah, maybe. But there's musicians and musicians. I mean, John Pizzarelli is a guitarist. He's a different kind of musician. He's just more that even than a singer. Harry Connick is a great musician aside from being a singer.
Right.
And I think that even adds more.
So it's not like we've been...
Anyway, he's great. Concert wasn't so great. At least we didn't think so. Not for us. Then we went out again. I mean, we were uncontrollable. We went to see a movie later in the week. And we saw The Gentleman. It's funny. With all this Academy Award stuff, you might think you'd be immediately drawn to see one of the Academy Award winners, which ultimately we did. But sometimes you got to make a choice, and you say, "Well, gee, this one we might want to see, and it's not going to stay very long. It might not be playing next week."
So fabulously reviewed.
So you see the so-called lesser movie, and that's what The Gentleman sort of seemed to be.
It was recommended to us
by our mom, whose taste we take quite seriously, and so we plunked down our $10 a piece, and we went to see The Gentleman, which is a movie. Directed by Guy Ritchie, and it's Guy Ritchie has done Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. He's done several movies that are real action movies, a little over the top in terms of the shooting, perhaps, and maybe a lot of rough, salty language, but kind of oddly funny in their own way, and kind of rough and tumble, sort of like James Bond plus about 5 degrees, if you will. And some people go for that. I know Armand does. And I guess in the right mode, I can. And actually, I went for this. So it stars Matthew McConaughey.
It has a cavalcade of stars.
Well, it has a cavalcade of stars. But let me limit it because we only have so much time. Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell. And most memorable, and the thing that made the movie for me, Hugh Grant. And Hugh Grant plays... one of these... A
pretty sleazy guy.
Very sleazy character.
Sleazy, sketchy guy.
And he is
He must have loved playing that.
He doesn't sound anything, look anything, or mostly doesn't sound anything like the Hugh Grant that you know. And he serves in an odd way as a narrator over the movie because the movie unfolds with him visiting one of the principals and laying out what he thinks is going on, if you will. And he is... fantastic, would you say?
And who was the other guy?
Which other guy? Charlie Hunnam was the guy who was talking to.
Charlie Hunnam?
Yeah, I know he was unexceptional.
He
was all right. He was
very good.
Okay, fine.
And he had the guy from Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes, Henry Golding. He was okay. I mean, look, it was a good cast all the way through, right?
So we don't have to go through the story. It's
Michelle Dockery was there.
Michelle Dockery, as one review says, plays a glamazon.
I think that's fair. She doesn't say very much, but she dresses well.
She shoots well.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it's it's a drug war kind of thing.
Right. So it's funny.
Don't tell the story.
I'm not going to tell the story. I'm going to say it's oddly the way it was received and the way we received it. So the way it was received, the Times, Manola Dorgas, whose movies review I read just for my amusement, not because she's anything really useful for me to hear on the movies, said she could barely watch the movie. It sounds like she sat in the theater with her eyes closed. Here it is, another, exploitation movie, violence, sexploitation. It's hard to say that. I think she meant there are no women in the movie. I guess you're allowed to make a movie about gangsters which doesn't have women, I would think, but that bothered her. And why are people still making movies like that? Was her review. And New York Magazine was harsh also because they thought that it was so old-fashioned to make the bad guys, the gangsters, Asians, and that was sort of racist. Well, here's what I would say to New York Magazine.
They were all bad guys.
They're all gangsters. Everyone in the movie is a gangster. So I don't know.
One guy wins, but he's not exactly
a good guy. And they make the point of saying he's not a good guy. So, that seems such a dumb thing to say. And look, the short answer is, for no particular reason, the movie was a lot of fun. And maybe for the particular reason is Hugh Grant. I didn't think I'd enjoy it that much, Armand notwithstanding, and I enjoy it.
Yes.
I mean, it's a certain kind of movie. You might compare it to Knives Out, let's say. It's going to be a fun, kind of oddball movie. But I thought it was better than Knives Out.
Yes, but it was quite violent.
Yes.
And the language is up there.
Yes.
And the language doesn't bother me. But I can't say that that everybody would enjoy it.
In part because it's a foreign language. It's Cockney English. And it kind of registers. You're struggling. Did he really say that? And then they're moving too fast.
Yes, there is a little delay there.
Right. So you don't take it seriously because they're just babbling,
Right.
Anyway, it's a fun movie.
Speaking of foreign language films.
Yes. So then we get to the big one. So we, of course, moved, as many people probably are, to see Parasite because Parasite won Best Picture.
Yes.
All right, who goes first?
So we went. Well, it is funny that I have to say we went to the movies on what was it, Friday night?
Yes.
And the movie itself started 30 minutes after we sat down.
Because of all these stupid coming attractions and ads and ads. Yeah.
The Parasite movie. We walked in 10 minutes before it was supposed to start.
And they started
the lights
early.
Were out and they had already started the movie.
That's the theater. That's the theater.
These theaters are killing themselves.
Right. They are. They were not helping themselves.
It's just kind of a mess.
So Parasite, just to set it, I mean, I think everyone's familiar with Parasite. But Parasite won Best Picture. It's a Korean movie.
Takes place in Korea.
It takes place in Korea, and it's about it's famously, everyone talks about it. It's about inequality. And it's directed by Bong Joon-ho. He won Best Director, won Best Foreign Language Picture, and again, won Best Picture. And what do you think?
I thought it was not the best movie I've seen.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest problem is it's a Korean movie.
Yeah.
How can I possibly get into, understand the nuances of that movie when I don't know the culture and I don't know the language? I can't judge. There's so many ways.
But all you can answer, the only question you can answer is, what did you think of the movie, given that's your frame of reference? I mean,
yeah, but I think that's totally, a lame frame of reference.
Well, no, it's not.
Lame. Because
But it's not. I tell you why it's not.
There
lame.
are jokes that are in there. I'm not going to get.
Well, look.
You can't get nuances about the language
but the people,
from subtitles.
Look, it's a highly praised film. Obviously, won Best Picture, and those are English-speaking people also. And they're saying, and you see the quotes in the theater as you walk in. The funniest movie of the year, comic, whatever. And those people don't speak Korean. So
I understand, but maybe what they think is funny was not part of the joke.
Right, but it's not because of the Korean problem. That's a real problem
for me. Look, I understand. I just really question why the Academy chose to make it Best Picture. It's worth seeing.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, zillions of people in America would not bother to see it unless it was Best Picture.
Yeah.
If it was Best Foreign Film, they probably would have said, oh, it's a foreign film, why go? So I think that's interesting and good that, the Academy created all this interest in this movie.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, look, I agree with you.
I think it was a fairly political choice.
I think it was a totally political choice.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if I had seen this picture without all the excitement about Academy Awards and just saw it months ago, I would have said, well, it's a foreign picture. It's kind of interesting. It's definitely original. Didn't enjoy it that much, but it was okay on balance. I'm glad I saw it. That's what I would say.
Okay, like the movie The Farewell, it was a window into another culture.
Right. So that's good because The Farewell was a better movie.
Yeah, but it was more accessible to us.
No, forget the Korean excuse. I mean, the movie...
I don't think...
Just put that aside for a moment. So we'll reserve on that. But the point is, in terms of what I got out of the movie, let me list. Farewell was a better movie. Jojo Rabbit was a better movie.
Yeah.
What do you... Wait a second. I'm not done. What's the movie? Little Women, better movie. I had my issues with Marriage Story and with Tarantino's movie, but there were scenes in there that were really powerful scenes you don't have in this movie. I mean, all these movies were better movies. Right. So I don't know what's moving. Look,
I would be super interested to know what some Korean
but again, I'm less interested. I can only take it this way.
I'm quite curious.
Okay.
I mean, a big part of it was the juxtaposition between the very poor and the very rich.
So let me see
how they live in Korea and how they all survive.
But let me go back to something that you said. That you said it was a political choice.
Yeah.
I think it's a totally political choice, and I'll tell you why. It's in terms of the movie itself, the comic stuff, I didn't think it was... I didn't see any comic stuff. But I don't like slapstick, so it's full of slapstick. But, I think they hit the hot button issue this year, which is inequality. And maybe it'll be the hot button issue for several years. I'm not saying it's an insignificant issue, but they hit that issue. And then the question becomes, fine, so you got a movie about that issue. And is this movie such that it gives you an insight in this issue, that it's a transcendent experience, that you experience that issue in a different way, that you come away seeing it with, a different perspective, moves you in a particular way about that issue? And the answer to those questions to me is no. I mean, I understand it's about that issue, but does it take me anywhere in that issue? No. And so that's why I'm very tepid in terms of our reception to the movie. I don't get it. So, look, I can't argue with you about if you speak Korean, you'd experience it differently. I suppose you do. But the awards given by people who don't speak Korean. And so they're saying putting that aside. I would
be very interested because I think, again, there's personality types that are cultural, language, jokes, idioms that don't come across
let me put
on the subtitles.
Let me see.
So, we need some help here.
Let me just say
we need to do more research.
Because clearly I need to speak some other language to enjoy that movie a great deal. And if you give me $10 and you ask me which movie would I want to see a second time, it would be The Gentleman. So
I would go back to Jojo Rabbit.
Well, I would too, but I wasn't putting that on the choice.
Just this weekend?
Yeah, just this weekend.
Okay, and then next week we have to go into Nueva York.
Yeah, we don't have to. We want to go to see encores. We always love encores. And they have Mac and Mabel this year. And the reason Mac and Mabel resonates is it was written by Jerry Herman, who recently passed away. Jerry Herman, of course, who wrote Hello, Dolly, La Casa Fall. So the music's going to be extremely good. And we saw a scene from it. They did a scene from it in sort of a review they did a year ago. And it was really, really excellent.
So this is at the City Center.
Right. It's about Max Sennett, who was a director of movies in the very early 1900s. Douglas Sills is in it. You've seen him in Scarlet Pimpernel, I think. He's a fantastic voice. Yes. He's a lot of fun.
He is a lot of fun. And
Wednesday night through Sunday.
Right.
So you can get tickets to this. I'm sure they're available.
They start at $35.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than
so we bring it up.
Porter.
Look into it.
But, yeah. And I do know some of the music from it.
Really? Okay.
Because they play, the original production.
I Won't Send You Roses with Robert Preston.
Robert Preston and Bernadette Peters.
Exactly. Right.
And
the music's good.
Time heals everything.
Here's something.
Time heals everything.
Here's something you might remember. You know where the music actually became popular a few years ago? Torval and Dean.
Oh, yes.
Skated to Mac and Maple.
I read about
if anybody remember, I remember watching
it. Was the overture.
Yeah, they were the great skating pair of some years ago at the Olympics, ice dancers, much loved English, and they skated to Mac and Maple.
Right.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
The Mac and Maple has been produced in England many, many times.
Oh, is that right?
Like every few years.
Well, that's why Torval and Dean did it again.
We never see it. I don't know why it hasn't made it to the U.S. very much.
I don't know. All right. So that's our recommendation
for this weekend. I've got a great article.
Go ahead.
And, of course, I read it online in the New York Times before I read it in the paper. Mm-hmm. And the great thing is, online, it has a better title. The title for it was The Guerrilla Car Washers of NYC. And so it turns out, and in the hard copy in the paper, it was The Car Washers of Inwood, which isn't quite as sexy. For decades, New Yorkers have been cleaning vehicles along the sidewalks. A city plan may end it. And it turns out, Inwood area, especially, I think along, is it Broadway? And 207th Street.
Yeah, north of Manhattan.
There are these vans.
Yeah, Inwood goes up to 225th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going there, Dan, to get my car washed.
You might.
Right? There are vans along the side of the street.
Yeah.
Okay? And you pull over, and these guys jump out and wash your car. All right? Only if you want it. It's not like the window washers from years ago who would just, kind of hijack you on the way to the tunnel. Right. Anyway, they have these vans, and they have guys who, one guy will jump out and he will soap down the car. Another guy hoses it off with a power wash. Then there's somebody who is hosing the mats and the vacuuming in. They have tanks of water in these vans.
That's the amazing thing. They have power washers in the vans.
Yeah, right.
That's unbelievable.
So the vans are equipped,
right?
And they have all these. They have the usual amount of rags and so forth. And they charge, I don't know, from $10 to $20.
Yeah, mostly 20.
And these guys are industrious.
See, I think
they say
amazing.
With tips.
Yeah.
And a good week in the summer, they can take home $1,000.
Right.
All right. But of course, in the middle of winter, not so much. Now, all kinds of people do it. It's largely, in many cases, immigrants. And there was one story about a woman who has, after her divorce, needed a way to make money. She has put her kids through school, she says.
Right.
She has one kid in college, one kid working as a dental hygienist.
Right.
By doing this. Now, here are the problems. Number one, it may come to an end because this area that's kind of derelict and therefore open to, extra parking spaces might be rezoned. And there's a proposal to build a 27-story apartment building. Right. And that would kind of be the end of that.
Right.
Okay. But here are the other problems. It's illegal.
But they're doing it.
Right, but they're not paying taxes. They're not having,
well, that's why it works.
Permits. They're not, think about the soapy water. They're not disposing of that water in an ecological...
Really? Are there rules about disposing of soapy water?
What? Sure.
All right.
Okay, if you're going to use it on a commercial level, that's definitely going to pollute the water in the whole water system.
Okay.
It goes down the drains like everything. So... there are many negative aspects and some interesting comments online as well. People saying, wait a minute, wait just a daggone minute. You can't sell a couple of sodas in the subway, but people will, turn the other way while you have this whole car washing business. Again, it's controversial. Well, but, you love the idea that these guys people are industrious, they're entrepreneurial.
Right.
So
that's what I took from it.
And the powers that be say, well, if this happens, we put them out of business, will try to make accessible, job retraining
Good
for
luck
them.
With that.
Yeah. Is that really going to
No, I'm on their side. I mean, I think it's a great, it shows a lot of ingenuity.
Very interesting.
A lot of ingenuity, a lot of initiative.
Right.
And if you take home $30,000 that way and you're not paying taxes, it's like making $50,000 otherwise, and it's cool. And frankly, if they rezone it, it's going to take them 5 years, and they'll find another place to do it. So I think they're in business for a long time. I think it's all cool.
So you're not worried about the environmental impact?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how that works. But here's something that I learned, or maybe I didn't. I don't know. So there was something that went viral about a dispute in an airplane about a woman who puts her seat back, as many people do, try to recline during the flight. And a guy behind her, and this is perhaps more unusual, pushes back. And every time she puts her seat back, he's punching back. So to prevent her from putting her seat back because it's interfering with his space. And somehow, as I said, this became viral. Well, it turns out...
Because we all can relate.
We all can relate.
It happened to me.
Right.
And I'm pissed off. I've never said anything.
Well,
but I am pretty pissed off.
If someone punches back?
No. Well, they don't punch. Actually, to be honest,
lean in.
The space is so small.
Yeah.
A guy like you sitting behind me, if his knees are in a certain location, I cannot recline.
Right. So this woman is interviewed in an article in the New York Times, and she says she was stunned that she did not get the support of the stewardesses during this experience. He's punching back. They come back, they see the brouhaha, and they're completely on the side of the person sitting behind her, which she doesn't understand. She says, I have the right to put the seat back. So that's the way she describes the situation, and she's ticked off at the airlines. Well, what they did in the Times is they consulted someone who was a fellow named Henry Hardevelt, who's a travel industry analyst. And here's his analysis, okay? His analysis is the person in the seat has the right to recline, but, and this is the thing that's got me thinking, airplane etiquette is you only recline when necessary. And if you must recline, just put the seat back a little bit to get the comfort you need without encroaching too much on the person behind you. And I have to confess, I wasn't aware of that airline etiquette. Were you?
No. But what's the difference between rules and etiquette?
I don't think Mr. Hardevelt is parsing that for us. He's saying you have the right to do it, but it's bad manners to do it unless you really have to.
Okay.
That's the best way I can express it. So didn't realize that at all. And to me, if you have the right, you have the right. But he's saying, no. If you're pushing back and you have a big guy behind you, unless you really need it, you shouldn't push back. And
of course you really need it. Give me a break.
That's what he's saying. So he's saying...
Who has enough room in
the
airplane seat?
He's taking the view that apparently the airlines might have, which is that the guy behind her has something to say about pushing back in her seat.
Or not allowing her to recline.
Well, this was news to me. I would have thought
that does not solve the problem for me.
No, of course it doesn't solve the problem. Is there's not enough room in the airline.
Because everybody needs to recline.
All right. Anyway.
Those seats are amazingly
Well, the etiquette was news to me. So the basketball folks, the NBA is having their All-Star game today. And there was an interesting article about a particular player, a fellow named Luka Doncic, who's Slovenian. And let me get to him in a second. I mean, I know, are familiar with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I'm pronouncing that last name in the Nigerian way, perhaps not the way you've heard it before, but Giannis had made clear, now this is Nigerian pronunciation, not the Greek pronunciation. But let's call him Giannis, sometimes called the Greek freak, but I think that's considered uncool these days. And he's now generally acknowledged.
Nigerian Greek is just amazing.
It is amazing.
It's so impressive.
So he's considered, conventionally the best player in the NBA right now. Milwaukee Bucks, his team, have the best record, but the NBA moves
rising star
quickly. That's right. And the Slovenian Luka Doncic,
I think you got to work on your Slovenian.
There's no question I have to.
I know who you can ask.
Okay. Is coming on like a house of fire. He's only a second-year player. He's very young. He's 6'7", 230 pounds, and he's fantastic. He had his first year last year. He was great his first year, but even then, people were saying, he's kind of overweight. He's not in shape. He can't keep up. He'll be great in the future. But he has become a superstar real fast. And already people are talking about him overtaking Giannis. I'm only mentioning because I want everyone here to be up on the latest phenomenon in the NBA. And they had a great story in which last year Luka's playing against the Lakers. He plays for Dallas. And he's about to get the ball. He's on the court, and he hears someone behind him cursing in Slovenian, which doesn't make any sense at all. And he turns around, and it's Kobe Bryant, retired, cursing in Slovenian. And later, after the game, he goes up to Kobe Bryant, who we didn't even know. And he says, "How can you be cursing me in Slovenian?" And of course, everyone knows Kobe speaks Italian and a little bit of some other languages. And it turns out the reason is because Kobe had as a teammate another player named Sasha Vujacic. And he's Slovenian. There are two Slovenians now in the league. And he learned, because he was constantly pushing Sasha, and Sasha was pushing back, all these Slovenian curses. So he was totally into it. And there's a wonderful picture of him explaining this to Luka after the game, and they're shaking hands. And of course, now it's a great moment, and it's a great photo. Perhaps not. But, without going in, look, he has now, Kristaps Porzingis, who you remember being on the Knicks, was banished to Dallas in another stupid trade that the Knicks made, and he was supposed to be the next superstar. Well, no one's considering Porzingis the next top player anymore, even though he's only 24. But here's his quote about Luka. He's just one of those, super talents. He's born with it. The way he plays, with his confidence, he just has it. Luka Doncic, Tamsen. Keep your eye out.
All right. Keep going.
No, I think you have something.
I thought you were going to talk about school lunches.
Well, I think, I could talk about school lunch. I know it's something.
Talk about school lunches.
Well,
you're on a roll here.
I have only one thing to say about the school lunch.
As long as we're cursing.
There was an op-ed piece in the Times after a letter to the editor saying that the school lunch program needs the support of parents throughout whatever city, and it could be throughout the country, really. Maybe the first article was New York. And the reason is they're saying, look, you've got a lot of kids bringing their lunches, but, if everyone bought the school lunch, the program would be better supported. And that's what we want to do, because it would be better for everybody. The school lunch program is better supported. And you should feel comfortable supporting it, because there's nothing like the government making school lunches for your kids. You'd be surprised how much they've improved the lunch.
I would be surprised.
I would be shocked. And so the article...
less than a year ago, there were all kinds of news stories about, really gross things happening in schools. Right. Out-of-date food and moldy food and so on.
Well, look, I'm entirely with you. The idea of someone saying, something, I could make lunch for my kid, but, the government probably knows better than I do as to what the kid ought to eat. It's so bizarre that it's so great. And they have a picture of 4 model school lunches. And I will tell you right now, each of them have either fat-free milk or low-fat milk. And I'm saying to myself, well, they're only, 5 years behind the times, just on the basis of the only thing I can identify in the picture, because everyone knows now the kids should be drinking whole milk. So, not a real confidence-inspiring photo.
With food, it never works.
Right.
To say, this is what you should be eating.
Right.
And, it's more patriotic.
It's so dumb.
Buy the lunch. You cannot get kids to eat those lunches.
No.
And think how much better they would be if you went ahead and bought them. It's the same people making the lunches. And I actually have known some people who are involved in the cafeterias, trying to turn around these cafeterias.
Right.
And, there are the classic lunchroom ladies who are not going to be turned around.
Right.
They've been warming up this frozen food forever. And serving the canned fruit cocktail that nobody's eating. So that's not the way to do it. And sorry to hear that. But here's a funny thing, and here's an interesting thing, and that is an article called Snack to the Future in the Wall Street Journal by Jane Black. Starts out saying, it's hard to imagine feeling thrilled at the sight of a vending machine. But this is how Dina Adelam, an endocrinologist and weight loss specialist at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital, felt when she laid eyes on a farmer's fridge. And goes on to say, there is this new phenomenon going on reasonably good food in vending machines.
Yeah, I can see it.
Where you need them. And this includes hospitals, government offices, airports, and places like that. And for instance, this woman, was working, needing to eat at hours where the hospital cafeteria is closed and needed other options. And shockingly enough, some of these are good. There's the one she's talking about is called Farmer's Fridge. Now, Farmer's Fridge is the big leader at the moment. It has 400 machines in office buildings, hospitals, and food courts in 6 states in the U.S. All right, and they serve all kinds of. They serve salads. This woman's favorite happened to be a pineapple coconut chia seed pudding, which is her favorite. They serve smoked turkey cheddar sandwiches, dark chocolate trail mix, hard-boiled eggs, chipotle turkey sandwiches, and salads in a jar. Because obviously the jar is more recyclable than a lot of other containers might be. They have an enormous commissary that ships out all this food. It's consumed, it gets to the places where it's going in less than 36 hours, which is a lot less than some of the fresh options you see in various salad bars and packaged salads in grocery stores, etc. And they're able to monitor through the internet all these different vending machines. The temperature is taken every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Stuff is not sold once it's out of date, etc. And they're doing pretty well. Then there are some other options. In New York, they have something called Fresh Bowl, which only has like 7 spots. But, and I guess mostly in Manhattan. There's also something called Chow Botics, which has a robot called Sally that makes a salad for you.
Oh, God.
So it has all these different, options. It has 22 different possibilities. Just like, what's your salad place you go to in New York? Chopped, okay? And so you push a button
I can
to indicate the different things you wanted added to it, and so far. So, supposedly that's pretty good. But the article does give examples of people trying this, and the one guy tries it in O'Hare Airport because he sees the flight attendants lining up.
Oh, wow. Well, that's something.
He says, and they would know.
Right. They would know.
So I feel like we saw them somewhere, and I just totally disregarded it and thought it was silly. But this is kind of a coming trend. Also, more coffee machines. There's a company called Truebird that actually uses beans from Stumptown. And the coffee's much cheaper, $3.25. And they're launching more and more locations in New York City, so maybe you'll get to try one. So this is just hilarious to me because I gotta say, at least 20 years ago, my father told me this was the coming thing.
Oh, God. Well, that's the kiss of death.
No, I don't know. The man, had some insights.
Oh, let's not go down that road. So you were going to talk about...
I was also going to mention, of course, your favorite soap.
Yes.
Is Dr. Bronner's Pure Castile Liquid Soap. I first bought it because it comes in an unscented version, their baby version, and I was looking for, a fairly pure soap, unscented, to take along on a family vacation, just because A, I don't want to harm the environment of Block Island too much, and B, I feel like unscented is something you can offer to everybody to use in the outdoor shower. So, people who don't like
but it's also,
smell or
you
that
can use it
smell.
To wash your hair, you can use it to wash your body.
Well, that's what they say. It was touted in the Wall Street Journal this weekend under cult following.
I'm part of the cult.
And it's, they say you can, like you said, wash your hair, wash your face, your teeth, your dog, your windows.
I don't wash my teeth
laundry,
or my dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makeup artist Bobby Brown is a big fan.
Yeah.
She keeps it. She keeps the peppermint version, and it comes in unscented, which is what we use.
Yeah.
Almond, lavender, peppermint, eucalyptus, rose, tea tree, citrus.
It's great. Just the unscented, the simple soap. It's great soap. It's very mild. I even use their shaving cream, it puts a shine on it. It's
awful.
It's like putting soap on and shaving, but it's good for your skin. I mean,
you're part of the cult.
I'm part of the cult. And the one reason people use the word cult is there are religious messages on the side of all the containers about how if we accept Jesus, everything's going to be all right. That's a big part of it. That's where Dr. Bonner came from. But I still love the soap. So, okay, special President's Day insight. Here we go. So there's an article, about a book coming out called Author in Chief by Craig Fairman. Not a review, it's an article.
Fairman,
Fehrman. And he says he wrote a book that's about to be released, and it's about presidents as authors. And, I hadn't thought much about it. And it turns out that presidents have written a lot of books. Now, there are those books which...
Art of the Deal.
Yeah, Art of the Deal. Trump has 25 books, which is with names like How to Be a Billionaire and Kick Ass, which is literally one of the titles. But putting Trump aside, I mean, a lot of the books are books that people write to aid in their campaigns. It lays out what they want to do. And those interest me less. But there are a lot of books also. Presidents are thoughtful people. They're well-spoken. They read and write. They got time in their hands when they're not in office. Yeah, most of them. Well, here's the big surprise. I'm going to give you the very top ones. And it's not necessarily who you think. I mean, we're all familiar with Barack Obama writing his book. Although Dreams from My Father, A Story of Race and Inheritance, is considered, frankly, a wonderful book. And has written in an article here. And I did a little research and about people who are critics talking about these various books. It's an article by an Alan Barra. And he says, there is nothing remotely like Dreams from My Father from the pen of any other American president. In fact, it could reasonably be called the first book ever by a president that examines the subject of race in America straight up. What Fairman says is that he spoke to someone who was Obama's editor, and they had discussions about whether, this is before Obama was a candidate for president, whether he should go into politics or whether he should become a writer. And this fellow advised Obama, forget politics, become a novelist. And I guess he didn't take his advice, but he was such a wonderful writer.
There's still time.
There is still time. Abraham Lincoln, also considered obviously a great writer and great speaker, wrote a best-selling book right before he was president, but it was really just a compilation of his debates with Stephen Douglas. But apparently those debates were so well-spoken, in contrast with what you hear in debates today, that it's considered wonderful writing. So let me just give you just two or three others. Some will surprise you, some won't. And when we were growing up, we all heard about Kennedy, Profiles in Courage, because it won the Pulitzer Prize. That's not given much credit these days because the theory is it was ghostwritten, that it was written by Ted Sorensen, who was later a speechwriter. But he wrote two other books, one called Why England Slept, which was a senior thesis at Harvard, and the other was A Nation of Immigrants, which were considered pretty good, so we'll give him credit. But you also have to credit, strangely, with Nixon. Nixon wrote a book called The Six Crises, and it was written before he became president. And this is another critic, Stephen Maldonado. His 1979 memoir, Six Crises, is widely considered to be a compelling, intensely personal reflection of his life and the time he spent in the White House as vice president. It's considered an excellent book, notwithstanding whatever you feel about Nixon. Jimmy Carter, I'm sure you realize, well, maybe you don't, but he seems to be releasing a book every few years. He's written a whole bunch of books, and some of them well received. There's An Hour Before Daylight, which is growing up in the Depression on a farm in Georgia. There's Faith, A Journey for Us All, which is what you'd expect. He also wrote something called Hornet's Nest, which is the first novel written by a president. And that's set in Revolutionary War in the South. But the final two presidents I'll talk about surprised me, at least. Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt wrote 40 books. 40 books. He wrote books like The Naval War of 1812, which was considered a brilliant treatment of how exactly that war was conducted and was only used as a textbook. And he wrote a book about the Rough Riders called The Rough Riders. But he also wrote a book which was called, let's see what the title of this is, American Ideals, I believe. And it is, American Ideals and Other Essays, Social and Political. And again, in the words of Barrow's quoting Stephen Ambrose, Teddy Roosevelt stands alone, unchallenged by any other 20th century president as a writer and scholar. Teddy Roosevelt.
You don't envision him that way.
No. But the number one book generally attributed to a president, and a total surprise to me, is, and you'd never get it because I didn't, Ulysses S. Grant.
Seriously?
I'm not kidding. Wrote a book called Personal Memoirs, Selected Letters. Again, this is Barra. A poll of American presidential scholars could well rank Grant's personal memoirs as the best book written by an American president. Mark Twain thought it to be the most remarkable work of its kind since Caesar's Commentaries. Matthew Arnold found Grant's prose straightforward, possessing, in general, the high merit of saying clearly in the fewest possible words. That had to be said. He was sick. He had throat cancer. That's when he wrote it. And yet he wrote 25 to 50 pages a day in his last days. And as they say here, candid, honest, and surprisingly self-effacing, Grant's personal memoirs is without parallel in American literature.
Interesting.
Yeah, no idea.
All right, so lately we're getting a lot of reading advice from you.
Yes.
Interesting. All right, so to wrap things up here, I have sort of a love story from the New York Times, an article entitled A Beloved Neighbor Leaves the Building by Peter Khoury. And it's the story of a man, Charles Dunn, who, living on the Upper West Side in a co-op, passed away just February 1st at the age of 99. And he had lived in that building since the 50s. And it was just kind of a charming story about this man. He was a singer. And he had grown up on an Illinois farm and gone to college, been in the Coast Guard in World War II, came to New York to be a singer, to, pursue his career dream. In order to help make ends meet, he worked at Schraff's on the Upper West Side, alongside another aspiring performer, Rod Steiger, and I'm sure others. He never became super famous, but he was in a lot of productions with a lot of stars. Like Alfred Drake, supposedly Alfred Drake gave him a standing ovation at his audition for one production. So he was in many Broadway productions. He was in a variety of shows. He traveled a great deal, even into his 90s. Because he was a performer, he ended up in interesting situations. He was at that production in 1962 where Marilyn Monroe sang Happy Birthday to John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. Yeah. He was there. So he was in those industrial musicals by being in an auto show. One summer, he earned enough money to buy his own co-op in that building in the 1950s on the fifth floor walk-up, which his doctor said probably contributed to his longevity.
Right.
So at a certain point, he did help care for a neighbor on the top floor who left him his apartment, and he used that apartment as sort of a pension, would rent that out, and helped finance his later years. It wasn't until about 12 years ago, which means he was in his late 80s, that he sold the higher floor apartments and moved into a second floor apartment for the last few years, and was renting there. He was still singing. He was still going to productions, even in December, very frail. He, his neighbors were fond of saying, if he gave you a cantaloupe, it was perfectly ripe, because he grew up on a farm and knew what ripe was.
All right.
So he was a wonderful neighbor, a wonderful man, a big man, commanding. And what I loved about this article was this little sort of observation of the author. He says, one great thing about Manhattan is that the density of humanity increases the chances of encountering people who bring something special to the table. Charles brought an extra serving.
Okay.
So that's Charles done.
Well,
and we're done.
That's a good note to end on. Yeah. So until next time.
When we will report about Mac and Mabel, among other things. This is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the paper. Adios.